okay, why are so many people Trump voters, and why do they feel so displaced and disenfranchised by minorities? It's because they are being displaced and disenfranchised. It's just not by minorities, it's by America, right? And this is the reason we know who J.D. Vance is because he wrote a memoir to try to show this. And it happened to come out just after the first Trump election, but sort of showing like the disenfranchisement and the displacement of small town America. And here's the reality: small town America is dying. The world is changing. There are less than 1,000 farming families in the country, right? And in the summer of 2020, my little family got stuck in an RV driving around the country because we were supposed to be traveling the world, and then COVID. Okay. And I've written about this in Un-American, which is my video book that you can access on my Patreon, a whole book that I wrote about whiteness and power and privilege and myself and my crazy stories. And we ended up driving backwards across the Lewis and Clark Trail from Seattle to Washington, D.C. Okay. And in that drive, you could see it, right? You could see, first of all, we saw no Black people from the time we left Seattle till the time we hit Chicago, right? Very, very white. And the towns are dying. The jobs are going away. The Army recruiting stations are some of the only ways to get out of there. And this is what happens when huge shifts in the world happen. In Culting of America, I'm arguing that one of the reasons we've switched back from trusting bureaucracy and experts to charismatic leaders is because we lived through an apocalypse, which was the industrial age running smack into the information age and leaving nothing untouched. And so right now, all of these disenfranchised white people, especially the men, are very scared and very angry. And so when an idiot comes in, a digit, and tells them that immigrants are the reason and trans people are the reason and gives them someone to hate, they fall for it. But they fall for it because somebody did screw them over, right? The country, the leadership of the country, and changing times. And there's this little piece about white men and why they are so angry. And it's because they were born 50 years too late. And this is exactly my ex-husband, who I had to testify against to be kicked out of the military as a white supremacist a decade after I left him, and is the reason why I wrote Un-American. And it's the same as J.D. Vance, as all these people. If they were born 50 years ago, it would have been good enough. It was good enough to just be a mediocre white man. And they're trying to do that again, right? And it's so funny because I always hear people saying like, if more of the pie for other people doesn't mean less of the pie for you. Yes, it does. I don't think you understand how pie works, right? It's not enough to be a mediocre white man when you have to compete with everyone else and everyone else who's had to be better than you the whole time. And so they are PO'd. Just like we look back in the day 50 years ago and say, man, our grandmothers were screwed 50, 75 years ago. They look back and they say, fudge, why can't I have what my grandfather had, which is just only working 8 hours a day and having a personal slave at home in my kitchen, raising my children, and everything and the world just bowing for me, right? So very complicated. Some of it is legitimate. Again, their way of life is dying. And when the world shifts, the people in the margins usually die, right? So they're pissed. They're scared. They're watching the American dream evaporate just like everybody else. And by the way, I want to be very clear that I am in no way defending them or the decision to vote for Trump. They are being abused and manipulated by a narcissistic cult leader who's giving them a place to focus their fear and something they can do about it. And this is what cults do. They come in, they weaponize your discontent that already exists. This is why some sort of gratitude practice can be really good to keep you out of cults. Right? They weaponize your discontent that already exists, and then they promise you that their way, their method, make America great again, is going to fix everything. The promise of the cult is always a lie, right? So no validity, no justification to these people for believing it. They have fallen for a cult. They are being conned. It's not true, and it's not okay to all of the minorities and everybody else. I'm just saying this is why it's happening. This is what we are seeing. And the other thing is, like, him wrecking the country is going to affect them too. So, this is what you voted for. The promise of the cult is always a lie. It's always just about power and labor. I'm Danielle, a scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership. I wrote a book called Uncultured, which you can't get on here right now because it is sold out. But it's on Spotify side of the subscription side of Spotify, so you can listen to it for free. I recorded it myself, and it was recommended twice in the New York Times. My book, by the way, is the blue corollary to J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy. I'm the blue J.D. Vance. I realized after the election, which is to say, the veteran that has a memoir out explaining to the world what happened. His was, "This is why angry white men voted for Trump," and mine is, "Your family's in a cult." Check out Uncultured.